Welcome, everyone. Good morning. I'm David Lodge. I'm the director of the Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability at Cornell University. Cornell Atkinson is the hub of sustainability research at Cornell. So we bring people together across disciplines. We're very mission-driven on the sustainability issues spanning climate, energy, food, and health. And equally importantly, we bring people together from outside the university with researchers and vice versa. We have almost a decade-long relationship with EDF, which has been a very important relationship for us in helping guide our research at Cornell and in helping put that research into practice on health and other issues. So we're delighted to be here and partnering with EDF and the Community Data Health Initiative this morning for this Climate Week event. Cities and local communities are on the front lines of climate change, and they are confronting health impacts, human health impacts, every day, ranging from causes of extreme heat and flooding and increasingly wildfire smoke. So we're honored to have join us today Congressman Maxine Dexter, who's representing Oregon's 3rd District, and Mayors Johnson of Savannah, Georgia, Sean Patterson Howard of Mount Vernon, New York, and Mayor Yadira Ramos Herbert of New Rochelle, New York. So thanks to all of the mayors for taking time to be with us today. We're also joined with a fantastic panel of experts doing work on the ground in communities, researchers and city officials. So thanks to you all for joining us. So it's my honor now to introduce Congresswoman Maxine Dexter, who is going to kick off today's event with some opening remarks. Congressman Dexter is the only pulmonary and critical, you can keep standing up, serving in Congress, and she brings nearly 2 decades of experience as a practicing physician to now a newfound role and calling to help bring issues of medicine and many other issues from her district into the halls of Congress and making progress on those. She's leading the charge on legislation to address wildfire smoke and committed to advancing bold solutions at the intersection of climate and health, with a special focus on safeguarding air quality, not just for us and for the members of our district right now, but for generations to come. So thank you very much, Congressman.
Well, good morning, and thank you, David, for that kind introduction, and thank you to EDF for having me. As you heard, my name is Maxine Dexter. I am a pulmonary and critical care physician. Most importantly, I think I'm a mother, and I was a state representative before proudly representing Oregon in Congress. Being the first pulmonary and critical care physician in Congress is meaningful because as a pulmonologist, I have treated for 20 years the things that people cannot control that they inhale into their lungs and the implications of that. The marginalized communities where asthma is exploding along highway corridors, the occupational lung diseases that people have been acquiring that we haven't been protecting, and that's literally informing the work that we are doing now. Air pollution, as you all know, is an increasingly challenging issue, especially when we are losing some of our will to address the issue. And in Oregon, wildfires are becoming a defining feature of summer and fall. In 2020, more than 1 million acres of our forest land burned, destroying communities across our state. But that devastation doesn't stop at the fire line, as we know. The smoke literally goes where the wind blows it, knowing no borders, and obviously having devastating impacts on our elderly, our children, and those, and our economy. These health impacts are real. They are growing, and our communities need urgent resources, whether in the immediate recovery phase, the longer-term investment and recovery phase, or for the health implications that we realize increasingly are immediate with smoke exposure. So that's where data comes in. we need data. And just last week, a new study in the journal Nature estimated that if the planet continues warming at its current rate, more than 70,000 people in the United States, excess deaths will happen by the year 2050. That's more than 1,800 people in the state of New York in 1 year will die. Scientific research and ongoing data collection on who is at risk, how to protect them. This is critical, not just for health, but for our economics and for how we budget to address these issues. As mayors and city leaders, you know that when things happen to your city that you don't have the resources to address, the federal government needs to have those resources. And frankly, we're not planning for that. So we also know that wildland firefighters have been out there with bandanas over their faces, fighting fires for generations. And we saw this long, long ago with structural firefighters, and you don't see structural firefighters running into a burning building without protection anymore. We need to do that for our wildland firefighters, especially as their skills become increasingly needed, and we aren't recruiting because people are literally dying as a result of their exposures. So our office is engaged in working on that. We're certainly engaged in working on air quality issues. But I think what's important for those of you who see the real life impact is that these are families, these are neighbors, these are business owners who are impaired by smoke exposure, whether because they have asthma and they can't get out of the hospital because of an exacerbation, or because their children can't go outside or go to school or shouldn't be outside or going to school, and yet we don't have the guidance that we need to prevent those harms. So communities can't do the work of collecting and applying data alone. We need it to create change. We should be depending on science to make policy. That can be a challenge in these times, but we need to focus on it and continue to elevate the importance of it. And the federal government, as David and I were just talking about, we have the resources to incentivize scientific research and funding data collection. And we need to, as citizens, demand that that is an investment that the federal government makes. We can help connect dots across sectors, making sure that we see the economic implications as well as the health implications of events. And then we can also, frankly, just prevent it or detect it. So wildfire detection is now becoming increasingly dependent on cameras out in the forests and helping make decisions about whether we're going to let the fire burn or whether it needs to be put out immediately because of structural risk or community risk. Those investments come at a huge cost. And coming from a state where we are increasingly paying for wildfire impacts, the state doesn't have the resources to invest. And we all know that investing in prevention is harder to do when you're budget limited. So the federal government needs to be a partner there. So there's many opportunities for collaboration. Coming from a state legislature, we had to work with our mayors and our local governments very closely because we have to be aligned in our budgets. There's not excess resources to be wasted. We should be thinking about the federal government in a similar way, that our state and local governments should be thinking about what are the federal lawmakers doing or not doing that they should be, and then influencing us. So we need sustained investment to help every community withstand the health challenges of climate change. We need to make sure that we are adapting now, HVAC system upgrades and the kinds of investments that we have seen making a difference in our communities have to continue while we mitigate the impact of climate change. And hopefully we are all in alignment that that is a crucial outcome that we must be driving for. And I'm here today because I want you to know that I'm just not a voice in Washington, I'm a partner. And having taken care of patients for 20 years, I really appreciate the importance of those stories, of your real life experiences and bringing it to Washington so that we can inform that. The best bills that I've ever had are the ones that came from real life experience, not from me thinking that this is a good idea, but knowing that it's a good idea from those of you on the ground. So please know that we want that engagement. I look forward to hearing from leaders like you across the country, solutions being advanced for how we can support them, whether, again, it's building infrastructure, fixing failing water systems, embedding environmental justice at the heart of our decisions. We should be partners in this effort. So there are challenges ahead. We are facing them right now, but we have to maintain hope. We have to understand that science is grounded in reality. And whatever is happening right now, we need to continue to focus on what we can control and how we respond to the dynamics of the time and not lose focus on the importance of this work. So I'm honored to be here with you and even more honored to be in this work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Dexter. Two things really stick out for me. One, how wonderful it is to have a member of Congress who is used to making decisions based on data collected from humans and environments. And so thank you for serving as a scientist physician in that role. And secondly, the comment near the end of the Congresswoman's comments about the Beth legislation doesn't come from ideas of her own, because that resonates as an academic. We academics love to think we have great ideas. We do have great ideas all the time. Most of them just aren't practical. So what's important for us in this partnership with EDF and the Data Health Initiative and many other organizations is for our research to be grounded in the needs of society. So again, it's a pleasure to be in this context with this kind of conversation. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Stacy Fujii, and who is the EDF Fellow to AMA. AMA is the African American Mayors Association. And so we're grateful to Stacy for being a partner in this and for being instrumental in securing the participation of these three remarkable mayors. So Stacy, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, David. That was a great introduction. I am Stacy Fujii with the African American Mayors Association. It's wonderful to be here with you today. As a fellow from EDF, my work with AMA is to help the mayors expand their capacity around environmental issues. And so today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing three of our outstanding mayors. We have quite a few outstanding mayors, but we've captured three for today. The first will be Mayor Van Johnson from Savannah, Georgia. He is the current president of AMA. After Mayor Johnson, we will have Mayor Sean Patterson Howard of Mount Vernon, New York, in a beautiful orange dress. And then following Mayor Sean Patterson Howard, we'll have Mayor Yadira Ramos Herbert. She is from New Rochelle. So we'll just ask each mayor to come up individually, and they're going to share with you what they are doing in their communities to help them become more resilient and thinking about some of the challenges that they face with the environment. So without further ado, Mayor Johnson.
Thank you and good morning. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Stacy, who is pretty amazing, and EDF and all of you. This is really kind of I'm good. A good opportunity. First, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm glad to be home. I had a chance to see my mom last night, so I feel really good about that. And she cooked for me, so she felt really good about that. But to be here to just talk for a moment on behalf of the African American Mayors Association, and particularly where I live now, my home, Savannah, Georgia. Any of you ever been to Savannah? All right, so Savannah is a pretty amazing place. If you go straight down I-95 about 820 miles, you will run into Savannah. Savannah is the first city in Georgia. It was founded the same day as the state of Georgia. At the time, it was the 13th colony. It is a city of first for a variety of reasons that you may not even recognize why. The oldest African-American congregation in North America is there. The third oldest Jewish synagogue is there. And the oldest synagogue in the Southeast is the home of the 3rd Infantry Division, which is the largest infantry division west of Mississippi. We have the 3rd largest port, busiest port in the country. When you think about it, LA is first, New York is second, and Savannah is third. When you think about that. If you ever have a chance in March, just to be down somewhere near Savannah, around March 17th, we have the 2nd largest St. Patrick's Day celebration in the nation. New York is first, Savannah is second, Chicago is third, and Boston is fourth. I'm just little commercials. But we're the home of Juliet Gordon-Lowe, who founded the Girl Scouts. Johnny Mercer. We are the place where Forrest Gump came to see Jenny. You remember that? Right. So it's a pretty amazing place for all of those different reasons. The largest art school in the country, the Savannah College of Art and Design, is in Savannah. And of course, those of you that were here last week saw the Savannah Bananas come and take over Yankee Stadium, because that's what we do. We punch bigger than our weight. And so it's amazing places we are every year from June 1st to November 30th is the scariest time in the world for us, particularly September and October, because there's something happening in the Atlantic, and it's always coming west. And we find ourselves every year in a position of being under some type of threat from some type of weather occurrence. Every year, we're talking about preparedness. Every year, we're talking about making sure that you're able to leave and possibly not come back. Every single year, for half of the year. Last year, it was a little different because we were hit 3 times by storms. 1 tropical storm and 2 hurricanes. But they didn't come from the Atlantic, they came from the Gulf. So usually, we're used to something hitting us from the front. We're waiting for that. But last year, it hit us from the back. And the concern about that was that when it comes from behind us, from the west, then we're worried about issues of wind, which is much different. And when you have a huge saturation of water and you have a lot of wind, then we have 80,000 trees in Savannah. 80,000 trees start coming down. For us and for we and for those that I represent, we live in a political world. Some things should not be political. Some things should be governed by science and governed by research, period. Climate change is one of them. Our climate is changing, period. I'm not smart enough to tell you why it's changing. I know the results of the change. I know that since 2017 that we've had 70%, and again, Savannah's 292 years old, 70% of our most impactful and intense storms have occurred since 2015. 70% in 292 years. Think about that. And as we look at 20 years since Hurricane Katrina, and some of y'all look kind of young, so you may not remember, but some of us older ones remember just the devastation that our sister mayor in New Orleans, her city faced during that time. It was devastating. We recognize that for us, every year when we go through these issues, if we're ever hit directly by a Category 3 hurricane, 3/4 of Savannah is underwater because we're low land. Now, that being said, that would be one thing, but on the other end of it is that as we get people prepared, our reality is that though there are some who are affected and there are those who are more affected. And that's where the intersection for us is. Climate change is distant, it's real, but the reality are there are disparities in health, and that's very, very real as well. When we say all right now doesn't mean all means most. And we can't stop until all means all. Hence the word equity, which in Savannah is not a bad word. It can't be a bad word because it just simply means getting everybody to the same starting place. Even if you don't end up at the same ending place, there are some that are at base level and there are those that are sub-base. And so the equity piece for us is essential because we also recognize that there are those who are historically marginalized. And for those, if they're exposed to geography or pollution or poverty, they will suffer most. They will find it harder to be able to react. And so we have to center health in the middle of our climate change conversation. And so while we build infrastructure resilience, as we do that in flood controls and storm readiness and energy reliability and solar and other alternative means, we have to also center the health piece for us. So we have to ensure access to power. Because if I don't have the same money, then when my power goes down, then I'm out. And I'm out for a longer time. I may not have access to medicine. I may not have access to electricity for my medical equipment that the good doctor, congresswoman would know I would need to be able to be okay. But what happens to that person? Should they be able to suffer just because they just don't have what everyone else has? How do we talk about issues of clean water and the reliability of that clean water that comes into our homes and to our children? How do we talk about that during disasters? So as we work through issues of climate, as we work through issues of health and issues of how do we position ourselves in the future, it's extremely important for us to keep the main thing the main thing. I will tell you, and I'm sure these beautiful mayors will agree, that we don't have the time to be political when it comes to our folks. We just don't, because it's not political. It's about people. And until we make sure that everybody is everybody, because we don't just represent the rich and famous. We don't just represent those that are able to pay their own way. We're not able, for those who are able to attend a political meeting or attend a town hall or be able to call their congressperson. We represent all. The homeless person on the street, we represent him too, or her too. And so for us, as I conclude my comments, we have to continue to frame. And we need the best and brightest minds, and you certainly are, to help us do better in the future than we're doing right now. Because right now it's taking us on a course that unfortunately, if we're not careful, will certainly leave a lot of our communities in disarray for many, many, many years to come. So thank you all so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How's everyone doing today? So I don't write speeches because I usually speak just as the kids say off rip. But there are so many things that are happening right now that I felt like I had to write a few things down. So I'm Shawn Patterson Howard, Mayor of the City of Mount Vernon, New York. We're about 15 miles north of here. We are a first ring suburb of the largest metropolitan area in this country, right? New York City. And we have all of the challenges of New York City and none of the resources that New York City has, right? And so it makes doing things very, very different and challenging. So Mount Vernon is 89% Black and brown. We have a poverty rate of 14%, which is 5% higher than Westchester County. They say New York is the Big Apple. Well, New York City is the Big Apple, Westchester County is the Golden Apple, and we say Mount Vernon is the jewel of Westchester. And people laugh because they say, it's more like the coal, but you have to be aspirational. We have 25,000 residents per square mile, meaning we're one of the most densely populated communities in the state. And we are the blackest and brownest community north of the Mason-Dixon line in the United States. When it comes to respiratory illnesses, our asthma rate, our COPD rate, and other medical illnesses really, really mirror that of the Bronx and sometimes the South Bronx. We are constantly looking at social determinants of health and how that has to impact the way that we develop policy and programs and partnerships in our community. And so now when you layer some of those things on with the fact that we have our built environment is 5 major highways that are cutting through or bordering our city, 3 Metro North stations. Manhattan has 2, Harlem and Grand Central. 2 subway stations, 10 bus lines that traverse 4 square miles, 2 rivers, asphalt plants, a state-designated brownfield corridor. We have a 100-year-old vitrified clay crumbling sewer and stormwater system. We have contaminated stormwater running into our bodies of fresh water that surround our community. And to add insult to injury, in June of 2020, our hospital was scheduled to close. Our hospital was scheduled to close, and we had to fight that. And to add that, we were on the brink of bankruptcy when I became mayor, $60 million in debt. We hadn't done audits for 7 years. And of course, they took away our bond rating. And so that's Mount Vernon. And while others may not look at us and say, oh, well, this community is too small and too burdened to deal with climate issues, we know better because we have to live differently. We don't have the luxury of ignoring climate because we live at its intersection. And so when I came in office, I never thought that climate was going to be something I was going to deal with. It was like Jay-Z said, I have 99 problems. And for me, climate wasn't one. People say climate is a white issue. You know, they hug trees. We don't have time for that. We're dealing with public safety. We're dealing with crime. We're dealing with crumbling schools and housing affordability challenges. But I understood that climate was not a luxury for us to deal with. It was going to be the foundation and the roof of the house that we were rebuilding in our city. And because our community and communities like Mount Vernon are the most vulnerable to the devastation of climate change, but historically we're the least equipped to respond to these competing priorities. And as a mayor with a background, I'm a social worker. I did 30 years in public health. I have my master's in public administration and in urban development. I understand the competing crises, right? And you can't just look at public health, public safety, housing, and food insecurity. We also had to look at climate. So we've chosen to lead boldly and unapologetically in this space. But we've only been able to do it with partnerships, data, strategy, and a focus on environmental justice. And so we are partnering with organizations like the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the Environmental Facilities Corporation, the State Department of Health, the State Department of Transportation, because we have a complete street strategy with being a transportation hub that really impacts the air quality in our community. We've been partnering with the Natural Resources Defense Council, ACLIMA, which has helped us do air quality studies, partnered with Harvard's Data Smart Cities program. Catherine Coleman Flowers, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but look her up. She just won, what was it? Not Forbes. Huh? She just won one of the National Climate and Environmental Justice Awards along with Bloomberg. So she's a national voice for environmental justice. And coming together with this coalition, they helped us to secure over $170 million to deal with our sanitary and our stormwater issues, as well as our air quality issues. And so together we've been tackling lead service line replacement. We've been looking at air and water quality monitoring, flood mitigation, infrastructure and upgrades that prioritize health and the safety of our underserved communities. So when people talk about climate change, they act like it's something theoretical. No, it's the flash floods that fill our basements and our businesses. It's the unrelenting heat that scorches our pavements. It is the rising costs of utility expenses that are crippling our seniors. It is the heat and the poor air quality that our children have to play in and go back and forth to school. And so it's not something that we can just look at as a side issue. But despite decades of disinvestment and challenges in our community, we are leaning into a climate space. We're weaving together fragmented initiatives and really creating a comprehensive system of projects, programs. We're creating a climate and environmental justice ecosystem in our community. We're advancing in our community the first of its kind urban heat island policy. We're partnering with climate smart communities. We're doing, as I said, our community air monitoring program, and we are in a 16-month cohort of the Climate Action Planning Institute. I don't have a big planning department and public health department, and so we have to go into lots of cohorts so that we could create our climate action plan and things of that nature. We've joined forces with the National League of Cities, and they've helped us to do a planning grant with the Federal Department of Transportation so we could implement a complete streets program with more walking, better mobility, less cars and less buses on the road that can improve the air quality in our community. And we even won a $1 million urban forestry grant. Unfortunately, we lost it, because before I became mayor, there was years of mismanagement, and we didn't have 7 years of our federal audits done. And so we got awarded the money. The money was taken away because of politics. They put the grant back out, but we couldn't qualify. We couldn't sign the contract because our audits weren't in place. But we didn't give up. We just partnered with the community, and we started telling our residents what it looked like and why the importance of a tree canopy. Because in our community, you can go from one side of our 4 square miles to a neighborhood on the other side of the train tracks. Literally, the train tracks divide our community, and you can deal with a 5 to 7 degree difference in heat, because urban heat islands on the south side, tree-lined streets on the north side. And what does that cause? Again, more asthma, more pulmonary issues, higher utility bills for the people who can afford them the least. And so we've told our residents that, and now they're saying, well, I'll buy a tree. And when you can get a few thousand people to buy a tree, that $1 million that we lost in that grant really isn't an issue anymore. And for the first time since 1968, the year I was born, our city has embarked on a comprehensive urban land use plan. Oops, I'm sorry. A comprehensive, that's not an urban land use plan. And it's really centered in resilience, justice, and community health. We're looking at our green space throughout our community. The green space is very important. We looked at 355 communities across the country, urban communities. And on average, 43% of their space in their land is green space. In our community, it's less than 10%. Less than 10%. And so we have to do better. And so we're working with new city parks, and we are reimagining spaces throughout our community. We're updating our parks and our playgrounds, and we're turning these underutilized, vulnerable spaces into places of kind of like healing and restoration. We're taking advantage of opportunities to do things around flood mitigation and to advance public health. And so in Brush Park, which is a 9.5 acre site, that is in our most vulnerable flood-prone neighborhood, we're planting 165 trees. Most of them are shade producing. We're installing bioretention and rain gardens. We're reducing pavement, and we're using porous asphalt and permeable pavers to absorb stormwater. And so through some of the park initiatives that we're doing in our community, more than 1 million cubic feet of water will be pulled off. And that's water that's not going into people's basements and into people's homes and into the business basements. We're raising money to do that, and we're really excited. The data is very, very important. The U.S. National Climate Assessment says that the Northeast, which we're in, is seeing a 60% increase in extreme precipitation, and that by 2050, we're going to see 4 to 11% more. And so we have to make sure that in our densely populated communities, that our asphalt and our grounds are more pervious, and we have to focus on improving our green infrastructure. And I'm going to close with this. Clearly, our work is not happening in a vacuum. We're partnering with AMA and EDF, and we've gained access to climate equity frameworks, policy guidance, national advocacy tools that can elevate the frontline communities. We're partnering with the Harvard City Leadership Initiative and Bloomberg Philanthropies Greenwood Initiative so we can lead with data and sharpen our governance and deepen our impact through equity-focused planning and securing investments in our community. We're working with the U.S. Climate Mayors Network to connect to a powerful coalition of local leaders advancing bold climate agendas and sharing lessons, and working with Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. We're not part of the Great Lakes or the St. Lawrence cities, but they found us by accident, and it's been an amazing blessing. And now I get to serve as the co-chair for the U.S. and Canada for clean water access, right? So sometimes even a mistake turns into a blessing, but this is it. These partnerships remind us that small cities don't have to act small, right? You can be fiscally constrained, but still climate forward. You can be under-resourced, but you can still do forward-thinking things. And while subnational partnerships are important and vital, we still need our federal government, whether it's through FEMA, through the EPA, through the, what do we call that? The Army Corps of Engineers, to work with our local communities around flood mitigation and climate change and air quality. While people, as the mayor said, can debate whether they could debate the science of climate change, we can't debate it because we're looking at the impacts in our communities every day. And so we're acting. And again, it's not just about the physical health. It's also about the mental health, because as temperatures rise, patience decreases, violence increases, mental health becomes an issue. As people cannot pay their utility bills because of rising utility costs, there's more depression and more mental health challenges. And we're seeing more people who are unhoused because affordability is just becoming an issue. So it's all a big, huge public health issue. It really, really is. When you're looking at this through the framework of the social determinants of health, you will understand how climate, environmental justice, public health, economic development, the zip code where you live and where you're raised all come together, and they're inextricably intertwined. And so we're just excited to be here with you today, and we're excited about the conversation that we're going to have and the panelists that we're going to hear from. And please continue to press deeper into this area and learn more, because you are unlimited in the different things that you can do from this platform and from this springboard. And we look forward to partnering with you in a more intentional and strategic way. Thank you so much.
Super tough acts to follow, but I'm going to do my best. Let me see if I can pull something up very quickly. And I have the privilege of working with Sean, and I are like 2 or 3 miles apart. And so it's really great. Can I ask for just a little bit of help here while I get started? Thank you, just to make it a little bigger. Sorry about that. I'm a visual person, and after 3 phenomenal speakers, I just wanted to try to add a little bit of value here. And first, Congresswoman, thank you so much for opening up that way. I think of all of my titles, being mom is my favorite as well, and really great to have. I'm a lawyer by training, which we're like overrepresented. It's nice to have people who have to like literally save lives, making decisions in Congress. And then, of course, to my fellow mayors here. So I think one of the themes, and I'm sorry, it's like my traveling roadshow here. Sean has seen it a couple times already. So it's funny, what I was going to start with today are stories, right? I can't pretend that I ran for office thinking about environmental justice as a main point, similar to what Mayor Patterson Howard said, but the stories of the residents. The residents, New Rochelle is about 18 miles north of here. We are on a shoreline, which is a beautiful selling point as an asset, but really puts us on the front line of climate change. And so as a council member, and now as mayor, finishing up my 2nd year, it's the stories of the residents after a storm or a flood who look at me with that panic and anxiety of like, there is mold in my house. Insurance is doing what insurance does. I don't have the money to live anywhere else or to fix this, and to appreciate the impact of what that mold will do to their quality of life. It's 6 years ago on Halloween, through a severe weather, a tree limb hit a child who was trick-or-treating and hospitalized her, killing a motorist on one of our busy throughways, okay? It's thinking about when it's really hot, as Mayor Patterson Howard said, thinking about competing utility bills, and do they pay for medicine and food or run the AC a little bit more as we hit our 3rd or 4th day of temperatures that feel like 110 degrees in the Northeast? See, as mayors, the thing is like, we don't get to choose what we work on, right? And for a lot of residents, we are their front line. We are the elected representative. The pickup line for me with kids is lit. The kind of questions I can get on a range of issues that my residents, friends, and neighbors rightfully expect me to have answers and solutions to. So I had to learn how to really think about climate change and how to make our city more resilient. Oh, my bad. Do what? Stay closer. Got it. My bad. Okay. Oh, online. On it. Sorry, internet. Here now. I like to connect with the people. So in 2011, New Rochelle did something called the Green NR, GREE, capital NR, New Rochelle NR, which was sort of like an initial foray into sustainability and thinking about a comprehensive plan. Fast forward, I wasn't on the council then. I think my babies were, I only had one, she was one. Fast forward to 2025, and we updated that plan to really think about how to reduce our impact and how to preserve and improve the quality of life of our residents and how to weave in those thoughts through all of the different departments that make up any municipality. Public Works, our development, where we have authorized 32 new buildings in our downtown. So how do you weave in green infrastructure and sustainability in those projects? We've partnered with nonprofits. We have a very robust nonprofit, Energy Justice Alliance, who received funding for air quality monitors to put in our city. And it's funny, it stressed some of my colleagues out. They're like, oh my God, what is he gonna tell us? I'm like, well, we can't address it if we don't have the data. Like, we have to own it, right? Whatever decisions were made, whatever the air quality is, you get the baseline data, and then we make decisions as partners on what we can do to pivot it. So I'm grateful. Government can't do it all. I'm grateful to have really strong nonprofit partners who are able to sometimes get grants that government, as a municipality, we're not able to get. The story of that child trick-or-treating with the tree that literally fell on her while she was doing one of the most American kind of childhood experiences motivated one of my colleagues to push for an urban forestry management plan. We have counted every single tree in New Rochelle. We've graded them. We've assessed them to understand what needs to be changed, what needs to be improved. And we're weaving in over 5 years, I believe, through our budget process, a way to really kind of account for the trees that are in danger, to think about the sections of our city that don't have trees, to think about ways to really be responsive as we think. We're a city, but we are also a suburb. So our urban forest management plan is a really important element for that. Cooling centers. As I mentioned, these hot days, what do people do? What are those that are subsidized, that are on fixed incomes, that are not seeing their income appreciate 2 or 3% every year? We opened 8 or 9 of them this summer and robustly advertised them in communities, speaking in Spanish, making sure that people knew that they had an asset that they could rely on from the city. We'll take account of who used it. We'll get a sense of how that worked. It was our first year with that many, but really happy to offer that just to help offset and defray some of it. It's scary. People are scared. You know, you should really, it's like palpable, the energy and the sadness that they have when they have to make choices among food, utility, or medicine. These are real day-to-day experiences. So we were happy to offer cooling centers as a benefit to our residents here. Stormwater mitigation. So as I mentioned, we are, sorry, this is like my roadshow here. So with some of the storms, we realized for a little bit of time, we were doing kind of like spot checking, like we were sort of like doing some repairs, but not really analyzing the flow of water. And so what we decided to do, you know, when you're like operating a computer that's not yours, we did an assessment of how water flows through New Rochelle and identified 120 projects that are totaling $350 million to repair. Our budget is $275 million. So we have less money than what it takes to do it in its entirety. But what it allowed us to do was come up with a plan that makes us more attractive for grants. We've been told that as we apply for grants, because we have a comprehensive sense supported by engineering data, we had residents send us pictures. We looked at PD reports, fire department reports. We were able to really identify all of these projects. And so we're able to do some cleaning of rivers, expanding some of the pipes, really thinking about borders. Water doesn't care, right? It's not like, ooh, New Rochelle, Mount Vernon, let me stop, right? We have to really partner with municipalities and other governmental agencies to get access and easements. It's been a whole experience in law. And even going underground through cameras to understand, like, what is some of this muck? Some of our culverts are from the 1800s, the late 1700s, so how do you repair them? But we came up with this comprehensive plan, really looking at, and this is just 2 years worth of projects, from north to south, east to west. How does water flow? What is the best bang for buck? And as we talk to our partners in state and federal government, we're able to say, we need $3 million because cleaning this culvert will have this many miles of impact on how water flows. And we're seeing some real tangible results as a result of this. As we think of infrastructure, in the future of our cities, I mentioned we've been building and building new houses. We're also looking to extend our train station. Our train station is the second busiest regional line of the New Haven line, second only to Grand Central. And in a few years, you'll be able to go to Penn and Grand Central from Westchester County. And so this will be the future of our train station, really thinking about green. These are bioswales, which help to attract stormwater, more green, and solar panels, which will make the entire train station net zero. We've already received $1 million in furtherance of that project and expect to see more work happening soon. Just more green infrastructure. And then one of the last things that I'm really proud of is a project called The Link. My apologies for scrolling, but you get to see all about New Rochelle in about 10 seconds. So we have a project called The Link. Robert Moses kind of creation of a highway. We have 6 lanes to nowhere. It's supposed to connect I-95 to another roadway called the Hutch. This is what it looks like now, that circle up on the top. And through some grant acquisitions, this is the goal, is to make traffic easier. But this green park here that looks like a soccer field, actually stormwater retention, multiple amounts of pools of water that will be held there. And with a valve, it will release it over time so that the water can actually hit the sound. So creating an asset and an amenity for residents, adding more green, reducing cars. It's a community, historically African-American, historically redlined, high amounts of asthma rates. You know the stories because you guys are the doctors, right? So you know all of the elements that are happening and really making it an asset. I have to put an asterisk though, climate change and bringing more trees and community resources shouldn't be political, but it has become. And through this administration, we just lost $16 million because the grant was called Access and Equity, because why? So we are now really trying to rejigger what this looks like. I'm committed and our team is committed to making sure it happens. It'll probably phase out, but we really had to make a right turn pivot. It's only been a couple of months, and designing this kind of project, taking 3 lanes of a highway off, building stormwater mitigation, realigning traffic signals and things like that takes time. So it's been a punch in the gut, but we're mayors, right? And for me, when I say something, I mean it, and we're going to bring it to our community, even if it looks a little different. But these are some of the high level ways that we have partnered in an effort to be resilient. As the Congresswoman started, as my prestigious colleagues mentioned, this is not just an isolated story. These are people's lives. These are the lives that make people just live an equitable, fair life. And so I get emotional when I think about it because it really hurts, and it's a lot to kind of try to package. That's the one thing about mayor, you wake up and there's like 48,000 things you want to work on and only 24 hours in the day. But I'm confident that when my residents look at me, I know I'm working really hard to do what we can with limited budgets, with the crazy administration. At the end of the day, they want us to fix it. And so just know that the work you do, the research you do helps us fix it for them and really has a tangible impact on their quality of life. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to learn more today.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Cindy to help me with where'd you go? Thank you to all our incredible mayors. If we could just give another round of applause, because that was incredible. My name's Sarah Vogel. I'm the Senior Vice President for Healthy Communities at EDF, and I'm going to moderate the panel today. But I first just want to express my deep thank yous to the Congresswoman who unfortunately had to leave for setting us off on such a great discussion. And I don't know about you, but I am incredibly both moved and inspired and so hopeful by the incredible work that you're doing. And I love this notion of data and partnerships and grounding everything in equity. And we're going to dig into all those issues. We have a really, thank you, outstanding panel to get into all of this work of what cities are doing, how they're doing it, how they're thinking and using data, how they're thinking about the underlying populations that they're working with. So we won't get too wonky. We won't get too far away from the reality of what's happening on the ground. But I want to move quickly. So I'm going to introduce each of you, and then you just come up so we can get started. Let me start with Tricia Stein, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for the City of Detroit.
This is a role she assumed in late 2022 after serving, are you going to sit? No, I'm going to stand so I can see you guys. After serving as Mayor Mike Duggan's chief of staff, in her current role, she leads a signature set of cross-cutting priorities: sustainability, mobility innovation, behavioral health, data governance, census efforts, and she manages strategy and accountability efforts across city departments. Small portfolio of work. She has over 3 decades of public policy and government experience. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and a master's from the London School of Economics. Next, Margot, I'm going to introduce you. Dr. Margot Brown is the Senior Vice President for Justice and Equity at EDF, where she leads our efforts to really embed environmental justice in all of our global strategies, policies, and programs. She's a partner in crime. I'm trying to integrate health in everything that we do, and Margot's bringing justice and equity. She has over 20 years working alongside underserved, indigenous, and marginalized communities, including many years at US EPA. She's focused her career on addressing environmental health disparities, especially among children, and supporting frontline populations. She leads and spearheads EDF's Frontline Resource Institute, which aims to really build capacity among climate justice groups. And she holds a doctorate in environmental health science and a master's of public health from Tulane. Next, Dr. Arnaud Ghosh. He's assistant professor of medicine here at Cornell, Weill Cornell Medical College. He's also a practicing internist. He works at the intersection of climate, health, and policy, and just last year was named an NIH Climate and Health Scholar, and recently selected as an emerging leader in health and medicine by the National Academy of Medicine. His research is driven by really firsthand experience with extreme weather and its effects, whether wildfires, hurricanes, or other climate amplified threats, and focusing on those interventions to protect those most vulnerable, including here in New York. Dr. Ben Spar is the program director for the City Health Dashboard and Congressional District Health Dashboard at NYU Langone. So his work is focusing on making local level health data accessible and actionable, helping communities and policymakers address health disparities through data-informed interventions. He has a PhD in public health from NYU and specializes in geospatial epidemiology, the intersection of health, environment, and policy. And last but not least is Dr. Lawrence Smalls-Mantei. She's a senior environmental systems scientist with New York City's Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, where she works on urban heat, examining the connection between climate, urban health, and the environment. As an environmental engineer, she draws on an interdisciplinary background in climate, land use, urban ecology. She holds her bachelor's degree from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and master's and PhD from Drexel, where she was looking at sustainable urban development, urban water resources, and green infrastructure. So I know that took some time, but there's just such an incredible, rich panel that I did want to give you their backgrounds. So let's get right into it. I'm going to start with you, Margot, because we heard a wide range of intersecting issues on the ground in these cities. And I think we often hear that climate change is it's a global health threat. It's a global crisis, but that feels big, it feels amorphous. So can you just ground us to begin with about this relationship between climate and health?
So as we embark on our second day of Climate Week, I want everyone to take away one thing from this discussion. Climate change is what we call a threat multiplier. So it doesn't just create new challenges, it worsens the ones that we already face, especially for the most vulnerable populations. When we think about health, we have to think about the social determinants of health. You heard Mayor Sean talking about that. And these are the conditions in which we are born, we live, we grow, we play, we pray. And they include things like access to clean air, safe housing, a quality education, transportation, nutritious food, and healthcare. And what's going to happen with climate change is it's going to affect all of these. So for example, you heard the mayors talking about the highways running through their communities. Well, what happens with extreme heat? Extreme heat worsens air quality, and it's going to increase the risk of respiratory diseases in communities. So what's really important to understand is that these impacts are not going to be equally felt by everyone. People who already face systemic barriers due to poverty, racism, or the lack of access to resources are hit first and worst by the climate crisis. So climate change does not only pose a direct threat to our health, it also deepens health inequities. And this is really unfair, and it's also avoidable. And I hope today's conversation sort of drives us in that in that direction, because climate change just doesn't change the environment. It reshapes the conditions that determine our health.
Yeah, thank you for setting that kind of stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series of questions to our panelists and bring them in. And this first round, it's going to be about really kind of introducing their experience and their work. So Arnab, I'm going to turn to you next, which you're a practicing physician. Your bio talks about this real world experience with climate impacts. And as an emergency response doctor, you've seen those urgent and often really tragic impacts. Will you share a little bit with us about how you came to this issue and a bit about the research you're doing in response?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here. So you can probably tell I have an accent. I'm originally from Australia. And my first real segue into climate was one night I was going to work. I worked as an emergency physician. And do you remember when the wildfires hit New York a few years ago? You could smell that in the air. You could smell the cinder and the ash. So for me, that was a very Proustian moment. It was like the Madeleines, except in the age of climate change. It was smelling that. Because that night, I actually went to work thinking, I'd be stitching up a few folks. I'd be treating a bit of chest pain. I'd be looking after some poor kid who fell and had a laceration on their cheek. And what actually happened was that the worst bushfire season in Australian history in 2009, where I admitted more about 40 to 50 patients with almost 100% burns to full thickness burns to 100% of their body. And that was, for me, quite a telling moment, not just for the experience of treating all those patients, but also reflecting afterwards and wondering, why was this happening? What happened? And really, this is where I think the health and the policy come into play. Because what was happening was that there was a policy in Australia which said that when fires come, you have a decision to make. Do you stay or do you go? And so people decided to stay because that was a well-trodden pathway that people were expected to do. If you stayed, you prepared your house, you watered your garden, you removed the leaves from your gutters. But what happened was that the fires were so hot that the people who perished and suffered were the people who decided to stay. So in essence, the policies that were in play didn't meet the moment. And so this really introduced to me the importance of thinking about the broad impacts of the policies we play and the fact that climate is a moving target, that today's heat will be not as hot as tomorrow, that the wildfires, that the flood risks are something we have to meet not just today, but tomorrow and the day after. And so that's more or less how I think about the world in terms of the work that I do as a physician and as a scientist. I work in three major areas. I study the impacts of trees and urban greening on health. I think about the adaptive aspects of it and the mitigation aspects. I think about how, if we plant more trees, and in what way, and also what species, can we limit the risk of heat-related morbidity and mortality. I also think about, not just today, but also in 30 years' time, because trees take a long time to grow. What does that tree have to look like? What has to survive the climate? And so I work with urban foresters, climatologists, and plant ecologists to think through that. The second part of my work is focused on the long-term impacts of climate disasters. The work that I do suggests, for example, that, and this is not, as the mayor said, that the mold in flooded households tends to cause more asthma. We find that. Your risk of having COPD and asthma increases 4, 5, 6 years after the event. And that's after your houses are repaired. So And then the last part of this is also thinking about older adults, and particularly the vulnerabilities they face. Because evidence from, say, the Chicago heat wave showed that those who are living in isolation, who are living on a 3rd or 4th floor walk-up, who weren't able to get out of bed, those were the folks who perished. And so we have to think about strategies that enter the home, that think about how to best address them. So.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful. So Ben, I'm gonna bring you in now. So you and the team at NYU have developed an incredible resource, the City Health Dashboard, for leaders to think about how to improve health outcomes. So tell us a little bit about why cities, why this dashboard, and your approach.
Yeah, thanks so much. Good morning, everybody. Cities are sort of fascinating if you look closely enough at them, something I don't have to explain to any of our mayors. But we launched about 6 years ago. Well, we did our pilot about in 2018. We had been talking to mayors and other people responsible for the well-being of cities who told us that they felt responsible for the health and well-being of the people who lived in the cities they governed. And they didn't have the data they needed, especially at a granular level, at neighborhood level, to make informed decisions or informed policies to improve what's happening in those cities. The public health data geography that was most popular at the time was counties, and cities are not counties. Most of you know this, but in one of public health's favorite traditions, we wrote a paper to prove it, because then we have something to cite. So I have this paper that's like, cities, counties, different, right? But if you spend enough time thinking about it, or if you took any sociology, it's like, all right, cities are these smaller geographic areas with tremendous population density, substantial diversity that you don't always see in counties. In cities, we often have the visible scars of structural racism, be it through the way that different people are sorted into different parts of the city, or through literal redlining maps, right? And then as we heard from our mayors, there's a lot going on. There's a lot they're responsible for, and they are not provided the resources they need to solve those problems. And if they are, they're often taken away for political reasons, right? So the flip side of the coin is that cities also have tremendous power to make policies to improve what's going on. But we're in a new part of our sort of cultural data revolution, in which you can't really blow your nose without some piece of information that tells you that it's time to blow your nose, right? You need a data point behind it. The City Health Dashboard is especially useful for small and mid-sized cities that don't have the privilege of the large budgets or large data collection systems that they may need to put together the data they require to make these decisions or to get grants, right? So for the City Health Dashboard, there's two primary use cases we think about, though there are many, many others. One of them is that we put the hard numbers behind the things that everybody already knows, right? The local experts, the policymakers, the community members know what's going on in that city, and we can give them the numbers they need to put into a grant application or to reach out to the people they need to reach out to with the force behind their intuitions or their knowledge. Another way we see the City Health Dashboard being useful is in starting a conversation. Oftentimes, folks know what's going on in the places they care about, like deep inside their chest, and they have differences with the people in charge, and they hate their neighbor and the HOA, and they've really got to get to daycare. You know, there are other things going on for people. And so the data give everyone a common denominator through which they can start a conversation that often leads to improvements in health equity. And that's the dream. And I'll also say that though we are focused on cities, the other website, Congressional District Health Dashboard, is primarily aimed at Congresspeople. We have data for the entire country. And so we are able to provide these 45 measures of health and social drivers of health for everywhere that people might need them now. And we're really starting to see people make positive change using these data.
Great, thank you. And we're gonna get into that. But first I want to bring Trisha and then Lauren in, who are on the ground in cities doing some really incredible work. So Trisha, Detroit has a host of challenges, and you're doing an incredible amount of work. So share with us some of the exciting efforts underway.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to thank EDF and the Community Data Health Initiative and Cornell Atkinson for having us, being able to tell Detroit's story. But I'm also learning so much. One of the first things I did was look at Ben's dashboard when I heard about this, and there's incredible information. So if you haven't looked at it yet, I'll just plug that. It's great information, and you can sort it and search, and it's not just New York specific. So I'm glad you lifted that up. Let me just tell you a little bit how I got into my role. I was the mayor's chief of staff in 2021, just as Mayor Johnson had talked about. 100-year weather events were happening on the regular. We had 2 flood occurrences in the summer of 2021. One led to a FEMA declaration, and I led that effort. There were homes, just as Mayor Ramos Herbert had said, of residents just looking at us in fear and wondering, what are they going to do? There's mold in their basements. I don't know how many people, we keep referencing basements, but every home has a basement in the city of Detroit. And that's how we do. And what are they going to do? And it was extremely hot. And so we had to lead this effort. At the same time, we got our ARPA allocation. So we had a whole coordinated effort of what we were going to do with our ARPA dollars. It was the 3rd largest in the country, of being able to do mitigation, adaptation, and equity, and lead with equity of how we were going to combat climate change and be very intentional about it. And one of them was flooding. And we did a basement backup initiative. And this is what it's what we called it. All mayors love cute names. And mine is not unique. So basement backup initiative, 1,700 homes. We have been able to camera their lateral sewer lines, and then see what repairs are needed. If there is a full replacement that needs to be done, connect them to the main sewer line, and then we always do a check valve. So that's a stop valve to then stop the water to come up. So a whole initiative to really invest in our neighborhood homes. We have a large single-family housing stock that's aging. And be able to invest in that and then make sure that they are resilient. And so not only are we building resilience in our own system, but also in individuals. So we also camera our sewer lines. We have a coordinated effort. Every 5 years, we are able to camera our sewer lines, collect that data, use that as a local data point, and then be able to repair or replace. The roots get in it, very similar to what the mayors had said and showed. I appreciate the walk through your website. I feel like I've just went to New Rochelle this morning, so that was fun. I'm learning so much today, and so then be able to clean out the roots. We also have a green stormwater initiative, very similar to what you've heard with bioswales, and trying to divert that water from our sewer system. Our mayor also loves metrics, and a PowerPoint. So his State of the City every year is 1 hour long of a PowerPoint presentation. Not every mayor's State of the City, but that's ours. And then every week we have a cabinet, which we are graded on metrics. And he is a former prosecutor, so it really is like a cross-examination. So here are some of the metrics I just wanted to share with you. So heat is very similar to what you've heard. We have a whole concentrated effort of 75,000 trees that we want to plant. We're 139 square miles across our city. Lots of vacant land that I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing with that. But so we're year 3 into it. 75,000, we're at the halfway part. We've really engaged our residents, and what we're trying to do is replenish and rebuild our residential canopy, very similar to what the mayors have said and what we've heard from EDF of how important that is to be able to have a residential tree canopy. And then of late, we're really going to have a focus, and we just started to do a targeted approach with blighted industrial and commercial corridor areas and partner with local nonprofits.
Great, thank you. So Lauren, you have an incredible background at this connection, especially as an engineer. So tell us a little bit about how you came into this work and some of the climate resilience efforts that you've been involved with here in the city.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So I started off actually in the stormwater space doing stormwater engineering, and New York City at the time was looking to do a large-scale rollout of green infrastructure, so all of the bioswales, rain gardens, bioretention areas, whatever the new term is now. And so we were actually working with the city to collect the data. So what's the effectiveness of the facilities? What type of plants and how much the depth of the soil and everything. But as I was doing that research, I felt that there was, missed opportunity, because it's not only flooding that's the issue in New York City, we also have heat. And these, no one was really looking at quantifying the co-benefits of these facilities that we have. And so that was actually my dissertation research. And so moving along, as I was graduating, they were also convening our urban heat panel. And out of that workshop, they came the Cool Neighborhoods NYC program, which was one of the first of its kind, really. It was a comprehensive, equity-based heat mitigation and adaptation program for New York City. It was launched in 2017, work started in 2018, and it involved both qualitative and social mitigation and adaptation strategies. So I particularly did the research related to the qualitative side, but we also had, quantitative side, but we also had qualitative parts of the program, including the Be a Buddy system, which is our neighbor-to-neighbor program, making sure people are heat safe. Through my dissertation works, I learned about building an environmental stewardship program and having people really appreciate the green infrastructure in the neighborhood. So the Cool Neighborhoods involved some type of education. And then it also involved collecting a lot of baseline data, where we are at the time. So I helped to deploy 500 sensors around New York City, where we collected air temperature data throughout the summers. And then one of the last pieces, well, it had a lot of components, including cool roofs and blue roofs and green roofs and such. But one of the other components was tree planting. And so it was a strategic, targeted tree planting program in New York City that was equity-based. So where the trees are actually needed, which included a maintenance plan as well. So that's really how I got started in the field. And it has led to, in the city, we still try to keep that up, and some of the other initiatives that have come subsequent after Cool Neighborhoods NYC, which we'll probably discuss.
Yeah, wonderful. So we've heard a lot about the importance of knowing what the problem is and thinking about how to target interventions, this role of data. So I want us to go deeper on that, but also not just what we collect, but why and how. And to a note to our panelists, because I want to make sure we have time for Q&A, and everyone has very busy schedules at Climate Week, we're going to kind of talk about that on the data side, and then we're going to do kind of a rapid fire looking ahead in terms of innovation and how we make progress right now. So it's just a heads up that I'm going to truncate this a little bit. But Ben, I want to start back with you, because you're thinking a lot about the different types of data that can be collected. Obviously, we've heard about a whole suite of variables to consider in terms of climate and health. Talk a little bit about how you're thinking about what are the metrics we should be looking at and focused on as we're thinking about how to measure the impacts of climate and health in different regions over different time periods.
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the first things we think about are the suite of social drivers of health metrics that are on both of the websites, because we know that the effect of climate change, no matter how, in what guise it appears in a city, we've heard about wind, we've heard about flooding, we've heard about extreme heat. The consequences of that are going to be distributed differently across a city, usually determined by these social drivers of health, like poverty, access to education. Some others in this space are looking at where are their air conditioners. If you walk around New York City, sometimes with some fear in your heart, you look up to see if they actually put the brackets under the air conditioners in the building above you. And it's like the heat deaths happen in places where there are older folks and there are not air conditioners. And so some of the interventions people consider are just, we're going to provide rebates on buying air conditioners because we want people to be able to live through the night, you know? We recently added a carbon emissions metric to the websites, and it's based on large federal data sets. So I have to email them today and be like, hey, what's good with your data? But we have it broken down by sectors. Transportation is the big one, industrial manufacturing, residential, to try and get an idea of, in this neighborhood specifically, what is the big driver of carbon emissions. I don't think that any of these are the right metric for a national tool, because the nation we're in is just so heterogeneous, right? 114 degrees in Savannah or New Rochelle is a lot different than 114 degrees in Arizona, right? Where that's kind of like, oh, maybe I'll wear my long sleeves today. And they're doing some incredible work about the distribution of heat deaths across neighborhoods in some of the cities in Arizona. My dream metric that I literally did dream about once when I was doing the lit review for it. If you read enough papers, weird things happen in your mind. Then we have access to the nation's mortality records. We can go to a restricted data center and analyze them. We also have access to historical temperature data. So if you can find what the typical number of deaths on a given day or set of days during hot months is, and then look at how many deaths happen during hot days, you can find the difference in the mortality rate. And our problem so far has been that establishing a stable mortality rate on hot days or groups of hot days is difficult because it requires a lot of death events. And we have 45 metrics that we have to take care of. So, I haven't given up on the idea. If you're going to run with it, just email me and tell me you got it from me and I'll be satisfied. We want to get these sort of metrics on the website because this is a way to quantify heat-related mortality that is also relevant across the country and actionable. And that's the final thing we think about with our metrics. If we tell one of these mayors, hey, it's hotter outside than it used to be, it's like, well, yeah, what are we going to do about it? And we need these metrics to be actionable if they're going to lead to policy improvements.
Great, thank you. So Margot, EDF has been thinking about this issue of how do we make visible more of the impacts that are happening at the intersection of climate and health. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that we've done and the tools that we've provided?
So at EDF, one of the things that we do is we work at, a lot of different scales. And one of the scales we work at is like a hyper-local scale. And at the hyper-local level, what we begin to recognize is that communities and decision makers didn't have access to really important information to determine their greatest risk to climate. And they wanted to find out which communities were most vulnerable to climate. So what we did is we developed a climate vulnerability index. We call it the CVI. And it's a tool that combines climate, environmental health, and a bunch of socioeconomic data to pinpoint where people face the greatest risk for climate impacts. The greatest thing about this tool, in my opinion, I think it's a great tool, but the most important thing about this tool is that it was built in collaboration with communities. So what happened was a group of folks at EDF worked directly with communities to say, what variables do you want assessed? And they had a host of variables that extended well beyond what you typically see in any sort of index tool. And because of that, I think we used over 184 different publicly available data sets, and it's tracked more than 70,000 census tracts. So you can really dig deep and pinpoint in. The one thing about the CVI is that it's not a perfect tool. It's a great tool, but it's not a perfect tool because, like every tool, we're dependent on data, and data is static. And so right now it relies heavily on federal data sources, which is very concerning given where we are as a nation. And so while it's a really powerful step forward, it's not the end of the story. But The great thing is that this tool can be adapted and expanded locally, and communities can take ownership to assess their vulnerability and their needs, as well as decision makers to understand the vulnerability in their communities. And so it's such a huge opportunity for communities to activate themselves to look at their climate vulnerabilities. And the other thing is the CVI is one of the few remaining tools. There were a number of tools that existed at the federal level that are now gone. They were with the White House, the climate justice tool around assessing vulnerability. It's gone. EJ Screen at the Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights is gone because that office has been removed. So the CVI is one of the very few tools left that really gets to the heart of the needs of communities.
Great. So thank you. So Tricia, we're very excited because your team. How could we have practiced this more beautifully?
This is the first time. I'm so excited too.
No, but you've been developing, and I love this name, the Community Data Index. So we're talking here about localizing the data, engaging communities in that. So please tell us the work that you're doing.
Them.
Yeah, let's show it.
Yeah. No, next one. There we go. There's the Detroit CVI. Literally, I know you knew what was coming. You put it all together. But this is the Detroit. So this is, we did 145, as she said. We worked with EDF, and we brought in 145 pieces of data from health and socioeconomic and infrastructure and layered that in a map. This is the city of Detroit. And then what I'm going to tell you is I want to highlight and lift up local data, because local data is very important and really trumps all other county. As you heard, counties are different than cities. I love that. And also federal data. And so now we are really focused on, and this has a local layer of blight data. So we have a whole blight initiative. Again, the vacant land we're going to talk about next, but we layered that in. And then next, I want to talk to you about what we're going to do with it and how we're going to really hone this and make this our own. And we're going to talk about air quality. Detroit is the worst city in the U.S. for asthma sufferers. We're always in the top 3, but in 2025, we are back on top of number 1. Our child asthma rate is 15%. It's double the national average. Again, the old housing stock that I talked about is not helping. Our high poverty rate, we just hit 34%. Census is also my responsibility, so I can literally rattle these numbers out and bore you, but we're not gonna geek out today too much. So in very lack of access for healthcare, we're the motor city, so vehicle traffic, all these initiatives are not helping. So what we're going to do is in 2 years' time, from 2023 to now, we had 8 sensors. Again, I told you I was chief of staff, but chief of staff, you just jump every day and you can't ever take a deep dive because the next day is exactly different completely. It's a different set. So the chief strategy officer, I can take a deep dive. It's the first one we've ever had in the city of Detroit. The mayor said it's my 3rd term. We really got to take a deep dive. We had the flooding event that I talked about, and that's how I got sustainability. I got mental health. I love the crosswalk that mayor talked about, and census and data governance. And so it's really tying it all together. So this project is so exciting to me because it really pulls all of my my portfolio together, and why I'm in this role is to be able to take a deep dive, lift up the mayor's vision and priorities, and air quality is one of them. We had 8 sensors. He was like, that's ridiculous in a city of 139. We can't do it all. So we've got 54 that we've added. The county has, we put all those dots on so you could see them. The county has some sensors. The state has some sensors. And then I want to talk about 2 really quick. I know we're lightning, but 2 really quick that's worth lifting up. One is the county is just starting. We're going to do 50 in the city to see if it's a good best practice. And this is asthma sufferers from 13 to 90 years old. So they'll get an inhaler, and then it'll also be a portable air monitor that goes with them. So it clips with them when they hit their inhaler. It monitors air quality, then we get real-time data that we can bring in. And so as a city, as a convener, that's what we're going to do. We're going to layer all these disparate data sets and have one dashboard that we push out with our sensors, state sensors, county sensors, these portable sensors. We also are partnering with lots of nonprofits. One I want to lift up that just got a grant, the Green Door Initiative. They are targeting childcare centers, and they're going to do air monitoring at childcare centers, and then they're going to do high-powered air filters at these childcare centers and really focus on that. And so they're partners of ours. That's how they got their logo up here. And so we're going to bring their data in. Lots of different partners. 2,000 city residents sign up for our alerts. We're going to push that out and get more so folks can have real data to make decisions. And maybe they stay inside. Maybe they have a different plan for the day. And then we'll also use it for smart development. That is something that I talked to Mayor Howard about, Patterson Howard, about smart development and really using these tools when you permit and think about development and be resilient and adapt to climate change.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So, Lauren, New York is also incredibly rich in its data. So can you give us an example of some of the data that the city's been leveraging to build community resilience to heat in particular?
Yeah, so New York City has a lot of data, and I think it goes back to almost like the Bloomberg administration where we had the open data policy. And so the health department has a lot of environmental health and climate data on its website. You just have to Google environmental health and data portal and they'll come up, and it's easily accessible. They have data stories. But one product that the health department is responsible for is the Heat Vulnerability Index, which has informed a lot of the heat planning, heat strategies, heat mitigation policies around the city. We decided to do both. In our metric, we have both qualitative and quantitative aspects of that, and it's an epidemiological study. So what variables fell out is what we have. But what's very interesting about that metric is that the concentration of neighborhoods that you see are consistent across many maps that you see, whether it's asthma or ED visits because of kidney disease or something like that. So it's because of the structural racism policies that we've had in New York City, a lot of our maps look very similar, but we still use the Heat Vulnerability Index to do policies such as street planting, or even when we had our AC distribution program during COVID, which we're not interested in doing again, but there are other avenues to get ACs. We had that piece of data available, so we were able to use it. We do have a balance between how much data we collect and then what's actually useful and what's going to convince people to take action, contrary to what some may believe, like actual agencies don't create laws. We have a whole city council that creates laws, right? And we actually don't mix. And so we have to we have to provide the data and hopefully convince partners to advocate for certain policies. And that's where the community comes in. Like we have our whole environmental health and data portal. You see the data there. If you think that's the right policy or the avenue for you, you can use that data to take it to your city council member and advocate for it. And so that's what we hope that you would do.
That's great. So you've helped us to bring in this really important role of it's not just data, right? It's engagement and what data. So Arnab, you've thought a lot about this idea of reimagining data and so that it's actually meaningful and actionable. So what do you mean by that? And maybe an example of why that's really important right now.
Yeah, I think there's well-recognized issues, even though I think the data structures that exist are quite profound and give us a lot of insight, particularly in our work. For example, the tree census that exists in New York City only covers public trees, and that's only about 1 in 6 or 1 in 7. And so to really understand the breadth of like how trees can cool, you need to build an understanding of like the entire canopy in New York City. And so we've developed some tools to help start understanding that. And because we think species matter, we've had to think about it at the species level. And so we use some AI, ML focused methods to do that. I think another part of this is also, we think about heat, and we think about heat as a risk to mortality. It causes mortality. But like COVID, if you remember back to COVID, or even it's still present now, for every COVID death, there's probably about 5 or 6 people who end up in hospital with COVID, and there are probably about 15 people who get COVID. Right? And so there's this cascading effect. And it's something similar with heat. I couldn't tell you, and I'm someone who studies this full time, which is bad of me to say this, but I don't really know how many people are affected by heat. And affected in a way where it causes them problems medically. We have some data to suggest that, and doctors note that there's heat-related illness, but if someone comes into hospital because they had a heart attack, because they were outside, and that heart attacks, cardiovascular disease is one of the most common causes of death from heat, I couldn't tell you that. And so some of our analyses is now focused on understanding really the breadth of this problem, which then can inform much more informative policies. I think just one more thing to say, a part of my work also, I'm trained as a sociologist, is really to get into the communities and understand data.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. To understand data from the perspective of the community. And so doing community-based mapping, understanding how they imagine their communities and what it could look like with nature-based solutions in the urban forest, I think is a critical part of that. Because how they see it is how we want them to imagine it, and how we can facilitate that, I think, is an important part of our projects.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to do a last round of questions to everybody, really about, as you've thought about what makes for successful actually using data to inform the decisions that are happening in your cities, what are the kind of key aspects that you think need to be emphasized, lifted up, particularly, I guess, in the context of little layer of the question, in the context of uncertainty around availability of data? So what does it mean right now at this moment for us to innovate, to be engaging with the communities that we serve in order to make sure that we're meeting this incredible moment of a rapidly changing both climate and political climate? So Tricia, with that, from all your experience, what would you leave folks with in terms of hope and innovation?
Hope and innovation. I think the time is now. It really is. There is no better time than right now. There is a solar initiative that we're doing in the city of Detroit that the mayor talked about, and everybody said, well, wouldn't it be better to focus on something else? Wouldn't it be better to focus on this? He's like, no, there's no better time than develop clean energy, to focus on climate change, no matter what it is. I mean, you've heard all sorts of ideas, and the mayor's lifted up, and Congresswoman lifted up some great ideas, even whatever adaptation or mitigation or vulnerability that you can meet folks at. Now is the time. These are real lives. These are real people. They are looking for leadership and answers, and I do think that there are ways that we can be helpful, and there are ways that we can think about this by using data, by using resources and collaboration and coming together, because now is the time to act.
Thank you. And Lauren, I know that you mentioned at the last moment, you're in a position where you can use the data, you can't pass laws. There's always a question, more data from your perspective and what you've seen successful. What are the elements that are essential for a successful initiative using local data?
Well, I mean, I always go back. I like history. Nearly 125 years ago, we had our first heat mortality report, and one of the conclusions was we need more trees. We are now into the future. We produce a heat mortality report every year, and one of the conclusions is we need more trees, but now we need more ACs. Because people are dying. We have nearly over 500 people dying prematurely because of heat in the city. So we have the data pieces, and it's up to us. I assume, to convince people that these data pieces are important and they matter. And there's no better time than now. And so we do have a lot of community partnerships at the health department. So we work with the communities to learn ways in how to effectively communicate the data that we have. I think that's the gap that we're missing now. Like we have the pieces of information, we have people who are like to advocate or can advocate or have the willingness to do the advocate, and we just have to connect those two pieces together and do it effectively. So we do have some partnerships and groups that help us to form like how we're going to think about this, what's important in the community, what are people thinking. And actually, we've done a couple of these focus groups and sessions and workshops, and some of the things that we're thinking is not what the community thinking, even though we live in the community as New York City employees, but we're very grateful for their input. So again, like you can reach us on our website if you have things that you're interested in that you don't think that we're looking at. Please feel free to contact us.
That's great. Yes, the importance of actually being able to communicate the findings is one of those big gaps. Ben, I'm going to give you the question I think that's on a lot of folks' mind. You know, we've heard about using and integrating local data, and you know these incredible partnerships that the mayors are leading and that Trisha's leading and Lauren is leading in Detroit, which are essential. But we do need that federal data. So. Tell us what you're seeing and what you think is going to be the limitations and some of the possibilities for your work. I know I told you I was going to put you on the spot because I didn't want to put any of our folks working in cities to talk about this, but it is really essential. So what do you see and you know, what are you concerned about and what are you hopeful in this moment about?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the softball question. So we are closely watching the federal data landscape. Just this past week, there's new threats to our food insecurity data. The federal government is no longer going to collect food insecurity data through USDA, which they've been doing for decades, and to our carbon emissions data. And so we are concerned. In the immediate future, because of the pace at which national data are collected and analyzed, we think that the most proximal updates to federal data sets will probably be released because it takes 2, 3, 4 years to collect a year of data when you've got a country as big and with as many people as the US if you want to do a good job with it. I am worried about 2026 and 2027, and we are like weeks away from submitting a commentary in which we talk through 4 strategies that we at my project are thinking about to potentially compensate for the loss of the federal data sets upon which we primarily depend. We're thinking about the CDC Places Initiative and the natality mortality data. The 4 strategies, just briefly, because I know we're on a lightning round. One is that, especially for CDC Places or BRFSS data, they're collected by states and then reported to the federal government. And a lot of these states will release those data on their own state websites. And they're releasing different amounts of data in different formats, and the Places calculations are using data that are not released to the public for privacy reasons. So if we were able to scrape up all that data, which would be a huge pain, what we can create using it is not equal to what we would get from the government. 2 is a downscaling approach. If we can get data from larger geographies, states and counties, we can use some fancy statistics to sort of impute or guess at, estimate what those metrics might be in smaller geographies like cities and neighborhoods. It's hard to validate those data because they don't exist anywhere. It's already hard to validate those data when we have access to the federal data sources. 3 is AI, and I identify as an AI skeptic, but there is reason to believe that AI might be able to fill in dark spots on the data map, right? If you've got a reasonable amount of training data from states that release data sources or release their own numbers, You might be able to train a pretty good model to fill in some of the states that don't do it. But how do you validate it if those data are not released by those states? And what if you want to get metrics that are, in another dream I've had, more up to date than 2 or 3 years ago, because that's how long it takes to do good survey research. And then finally, EHR is gaining a lot of momentum and attention. It's electronic health records. So hospital systems will combine all their medical records into databases that you can use to figure out the incidence, hopefully, or better yet, the prevalence of a health condition in a given place. But those can be considered convenient samples, because who's going to this hospital system? Like, we know that some people go to the doctor more than others for a whole host of reasons. Social norms, health insurance, doctors can be mean, doctors can be mean sometimes to some people, right? So are those representative? And the headline is, please don't take away our data. We want to keep what we have, and there's probably some tapestry woven between these 4 strategies and others we haven't come up with yet that will help us bridge the gap if those gaps appear.
Well, I appreciate you laying out those strategies for folks to begin to build on. Arnaud, I want you to come in and build on this, especially in terms of whether you've been seeing some discussions around innovations on the health data. I know you've flagged that has, even before our current political situation, has been a challenge in doing this work, at a more hyper local level. So really anything you want to add to that, but particularly around the health data piece.
Yeah, I think I want to reiterate what Lauren said. I think it's critical, and I reflect upon a comment a boss made to me once, having spent hours and hours doing an analysis, where he said to me, "Anna, what I see here is a lot of math and not a lot of insight." And talking about mean bosses. And I think that speaks to the idea of, broadly, what are even though we have data, what can we do with it and what does it really mean? I think we live in an environment now where data infrastructure, as Ben rightly pointed out, is being assailed, and the trust in the data itself is being questioned. And how to address this has been a conversation I've had at the National Institutes of Health, in the National Academy of Medicine, where people said, even if we do all this work, people don't believe it or trust it. And I think that comes back to how do we bring it to the people, and what can they do with it? And how do they see the solutions that are going to be influential? And that's, I think, going to be a critical part of moving forward, because what worries me, I actually had a long chat with the climate mayors, that consortium a little while ago. What really struck me was that they said, we're not sure we can trust the federal government anymore to provide this. Like, once the rug has been pulled out, who's going to go back and pretend that this is still in place? Are we having to build the infrastructure ourselves and then enable it, finance it, and alike, and then use it? And then if we're going to use it, we want to make sure it is used in an appropriate way to the best of our ability, because we're all, sadly, we lack the finances to really see this through. So I think that's going to be a critical part, not just how to use the data or where we get it from, but what we do with it.
Yes. We have a trust gap, so we could collect all the data we want, and it won't help. So Margaret, I'm going to give you the last word. So we know that, to this last point I made, this isn't just about collecting data for data's sake. Data just doesn't help us make solutions. What's at stake for you as you think about this moment that we're in, both politically, but also the opportunities and the real needs at the community level?
I think what's really at stake here are people's lives. I get this question a lot, and people say, what's at stake? And I say death. And I have a personal story for that. I was in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit. And I was one of the lucky ones, because I had enough money for a plane ticket and a place to go. And I never returned to my home. I never returned to my community. And I lost everything I owned. But I was one of the lucky ones, because I didn't lose a friend. I didn't lose a family member. And so when you ask me that question, what's at stake are people's lives. But what gives me hope in this moment in terms of opportunities? I look out in this audience and I'm staring at a number of young faces. And I this is very cliche, and I say this all the time, and I deeply mean it. You all who are sitting with us today, you young folk, you represent none of our past, just a segment of our present, but you represent all of our future. And just seeing you here today, engaging, is what gives me hope, because I really believe that the creativity and the ingenuity to get us out of this climate crisis is going to start with these young people who are here in this room today.
You're here. I agree. Thank you. And I'll say that what has given me hope is just the incredible leadership in cities. I mean, thank you so much for coming and sharing the work that you're doing, bringing data and partnerships and fellowships and everyone to this incredibly it's an existential moment for us, really. So join me in thanking the panel. And then we have 13 minutes for questions and discussion, and you can ask the question, and we can go out in the hall. Before we thank the panel and open it up and think about your questions, I just want to express my thanks, of course, again to the mayors for coming, to AMA for helping make that possible, to all the panelists, to our partners at Cornell. It was a real joy to organize this with you, and to our partners at the Community Data Health Initiative. So let's thank the panelists and think of a question. We have mics up here, so anyone, start us off. Yes, Lauren, you want to grab a mic and I can move it around.
Just first want to say thank you, panelists and event organizers, for this wonderful conversation. It's so important to consider health and the climate action we do, and this is a great conversation on that. A year ago, a study found that during tropical cyclone events like tropical storms, hurricanes, that there is excess mortality that persists for 15 years after each geophysical event, which means that the average tropical cyclone generates 7,000 to 11,000 excess deaths, which is greatly higher than the 24 that is traditionally reported. So my question is, how do we deal with the very indirect effects of climate disasters when we can't essentially pinpoint this one-fits-all solution, but this is something that affects so many people and needs to be addressed urgently?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Who wants to take a first stab at that one? Anyone? Arnab?
I'll give this a crack because I work in the hurricane space. It's interesting. We did an analysis after Hurricane Sandy where we showed that the event rates of heart attacks and strokes and heart failure, which are common problems, persist up to 5 years. When we look at individuals and we studied their medical conditions along with where they lived, along with a series of socioeconomic variables like their income, their race, etc., where they lived, the effect was removed. And so what that tells us is that the majority of what's driving, at least, and this is, again, mindful of what happened yesterday at the White House. This is not peer-reviewed yet, and it's still preliminary data. But what it suggests is that it's really the social drivers that are the things that are meeting this. Now, I think that's pretty. I think on the surface that makes sense. We have some data to show that, but I think that's what we're seeing. The conflagration, the fact that these things linger because of the underlying structures in our society and how they lead certain people and their communities to poorer health.
The threat magnification effect. Yes, please.
Hi, Sarah Dumas from George Washington University School of Public Health. I've heard a lot over the past 2 days about extreme heat, extreme weather events, asthma. I'm wondering to what extent, if at all, your cities, and I guess this goes for the mayors as well, leadership and communities in your cities are talking about the effects and the increased risk of infectious diseases due to climate on health. We've seen the spread of vector-borne diseases, but of course, increased risk of foodborne diseases, waterborne diseases as well. Are those conversations happening as well? Anyone want to?
I can start just a short answer. Yes, we do look at that. And so although they're not in, I'm in the Bureau of Environmental Surveillance and Policy, and there's actually a separate bureau that deals with infectious diseases, and we do have crosstalks with climate issues.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
You know, for cities, especially smaller cities like ours, we have to rely on the county for some of that work, the County Department of Health. And so in Westchester, after watching New York City talk about Legionnaire's disease for the entire summer, finally our County Department of Health came out and talked about the number of deaths and the number of cases we had in our county. It's like, what? We weren't aware of this. And if you didn't know, and if you didn't have a case, then you weren't aware that it was even present in the county. And so, you know, we're having to lean in and really speak to the county about sharing some of that information and that data and how we collectively are going to do it. Because again, it is the under-resourced communities that are going to be impacted the most. And so we have to be at the table for that discussion.
Yeah.
And to put the cherry on top, we have a federal government who we can't even trust anymore to listen to science, and they just make up stuff as they go along. They make up stuff as they go along. And at the end of the day, people die. And I mean, I can't even imagine what that looks like. That when we used to believe scientists, because scientists say, but now we have folks who are making science policy that are not scientists, they're politicians.
Right back there and then here.
Hi, I'm David Kay. I'm a Cornell faculty member and chair of the National Cooperative Extension Climate Initiative. Also been involved in local government climate planning for many years. So my question is, one of the things that's happened, I think, in most municipal climate policies is there's been a shift from a lot of early climate work that was focused on the mitigation side of climate issues and planning for that towards what we're talking about more here, which is adaptation to existing climate risk. So my question for the people involved in municipal policy is, through the health lens, which I'm really excited about and trying to connect with more, how do you think about mitigation from a health perspective, climate mitigation? Is there a connection? Isn't there a connection? Is it all adaptation now?
Do you want to?
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Ours is a full mix of protecting the most vulnerable, doing a mitigation and adaptation. It has to be a mix. It can't be one or the other. We have, as I wanted to talk about, is our vacant land. So we have 124,000 parcels that are vacant. Most of that was from, blighted properties that we had to demo to stabilize. So that results in 8,500 acres, 13.3 square miles. We could put, 4 of your, and so what we've done is we're taking vacant, blighted land, and we've got a whole coordinated strategy. So this is just one of them, but we're doing urban farms. So we've had 60 plus urban farms. So that is covering a lot of different areas, protecting the vulnerable, mitigation, adaptation, all to stabilize the land, make it more productive, stabilize neighborhoods, make the land more productive, grow locally sourced food. We also are developing 31 megawatts of clean energy in residential neighborhoods. That was what the mayor was talking about when everybody said, well, why don't you just do a PPA and just do it in farmland? He's like, well, why wouldn't we do it here? So then we can cover a bunch of different topics. Is that there is public health benefits. So before the change of administration, we ran it through the EPA COBRA model, which was a fantastic tool and model, $23 million worth of benefits from developing 165 acres. That's mostly vacant, blighted. That's what it looks like on the left. That's 1 or 2 homes on a street, lots of illegal dumping. And then we're going to repurpose that land. The residents could apply for it. The mayor did an open invitation, and community groups could apply. So we led with equity, and they said they drew the boundaries. We want this area to be developed, and then surrounding the area, they also drew those boundaries. We did investments of energy efficiency upgrades into homes. So we're putting in at least $15,000. Again, it's all based on the number of acres that they applied for, and then the number of homes that they put in their target area. And so again, it's a layered approach. It's not just one. It's got to protect the most vulnerable, stabilize the neighborhoods, invest in it, public health benefits, and developing clean energy. This will be utility grade solar that will be sold on the MISO market. And then, but to do that, we also have to invest in the infrastructure in that neighborhood to bring it up to be able to sustain that level of solar so that they have benefits as well. So then it'll be more grid development. There's a workforce component. We're told that we've got 2 developers. Well, you have to hire local people to put in this solar, all equity. Again, it's just a layered approach. This is one really excited example that I get to lead, to talk about how you can do it in your city. You can lead with equity, you can have adaptation, mitigation, protect the most vulnerable, and put it all in a layered approach.
Can I just add very quickly? I think it is a comprehensive approach, but on the funding side, maybe the majority of mitigation projects are now funded, especially in the heat space, are funded by health. It's very hard to compete with the floodings of the world and the storms when you're looking for funding, because it's hard to quantify heat benefits. And so a lot of those heat benefits it may be leaning towards health, although those are very hard, but they're more persuasive. So.
We have a lot, but we have only a couple minutes, so why don't I do, it was you, right? And then there, and then there, and there. Let's do all of the questions, and then we can synthesize it for you.
Okay, I'll go fast. Hi, I'm Beatrice Ruan. I'm with the University of Miami Climate Resilience Institute, and we talk a lot about heat, obviously being in South Florida. I wanted to know if there are any other tangible ways that we're doing, maybe combining the sensors that you were talking about, Tricia, with the air quality monitoring for heat, like body core temperature in individuals, and how we're addressing the heat mortality issue, or just heat issue in general, how individuals are experiencing heat, and if there's any sort of work that you all have been doing in your cities or in your research on that.
I want to just hand it back there, and then we'll pass it around and get all the questions.
Hi, my name's Russell Scher. Margot, you referenced that the youth are kind of taking on this climate debt from other generations. And I just want to know, ask the panel, how are you all engaging with your youth? How are you getting them involved with your movements and keeping them engaged and working towards climate action?
Hi, Alex Hurley with Global Energy Monitor. We make open source data sets on energy infrastructure around the world. And we've done some looking into some air pollution from fossil fuels using the COBRA tool that was just mentioned. And it plugging in air pollution data, it helps to quantify those impacts, but also in economic terms, adding up the health impacts from air pollution and fossil fuels, and then putting that into a dollar value. I'm just curious to hear the panel's experience, opinions of putting those public health impacts into the dollar values, and using that to communicate with partners, with people that you're competing against, to try to get things done.
Hi there, thank you all. I'm Sarah Carrera. I'm with the Center for Active Design, and we run the Fitwell standard, which is a healthy building certification standard, really working to translate public health evidence into solutions for the real estate sector. So building on the last question, really curious about any opportunities you guys have seen or see to bring the private sector and the real estate sector, which has such a huge impact on our infrastructure, on the buildings in which we occupy, into this effort to really promote health and sustainability in the long term.
Fantastic. So we've got heat, we've got youth making the economic case and engaging the private sector, to totally simplify. Who wants to take a start at any of those?
Yeah, I'm happy to start with youth, and thank you for your question. We do a lot of work with youth, and we don't do just work with youth here in the United States. We do work with youth globally. This year alone, I've probably engaged with about 3,000 to 4,000 youth across the global South. In addition to that, we do a lot of supporting youth movements. So like youth-based organizations, there's one that I would all recommend that you look up. It's the Youth Climate Collaborative. It's just a very simple collaborative. You go online and they're so well resourced and so well networked. So we support a lot of their programming and the work that they do. This week on Sunday, we had an event in Queens within a group called Streetworks Earth, where we work with, it's a group called the Veggie Nuggets and a bunch of young people. And what we're doing is co-creating art and teaching people about climate at the same time. And we had 10,000 people come through. While it was an intergenerational event, we had, children as young as 2 or 3 to people as old as 70 who are really engaged, deeply engaged in the co-creative experience of art. We also do a lot of youth education. So we're working wherever we can strategically with partners to engage and really support youth. I wanted to address the question that that both of you mentioned. Something that I noticed last year at Climate Week that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was in a room and I was like, oh my God, I'm the only environmental justice person in this room. And it could be a health conversation. It could be a mitigation conversation. It didn't matter what the conversation was. It was so siloed. And I was like, how in the world are we going to solve a multi-dimensional problem from silos? So one of the things that we've started doing in our work is actually working with venture capitalists around how to address mitigation technologies and also this thing around housing, and really working with VCs who invest in this and are interested in the climate space, but taking a new approach where tomorrow we're having a conversation where there's going to be VCs, there's going to be economists, there's going to be public health people, there's going to be EJ people, and there's going to be climate scientists. And the whole movement is called Moving from Silos to Solutions.
Anyone else want to touch on?
So I can, to the last point about the housing and the real estate connections, climate plays a major role in that because of the built environment. And we specifically at the health department are looking at it in the terms of energy and security. And so we have a multi-year study that we've done. We have a couple papers published, and we're actually doing in the process of producing a housing and energy and security paper. So whether it's housing inefficiencies or the way in which we build housing in New York City, who gets the housing and such, we've also looked at. So that's a major piece. And I just completed a fellowship actually in seniors in housing, and there was a large climate component in that as well. So it's something that we definitely look at and involve the private sector, and the public sector has to take a leading role in some of those initiatives that we do to the built environment. There was another one about the individual sensors, the wearable sensors, which I think is really cool. We would love to do. We do some indoor. We did some indoor temperature studies, but I would love to see that type of study, the wearables in New York City.
Anyone else? Please.
I'll just grab this. Just super rapid fire. So on the youth side, we in New Rochelle, we've put them on. So I'm a former dean of students at Columbia Law. I love being with students as a general concept. So we have youth involved in everything. We have an environmental natural resource advisory committee. We're swearing in 2 or 3 youth tomorrow. We have a summer youth employment program where we pay 500 kids $16 an hour. One of them was an eco ambassadors. We had about 20 kids earning money, and the shoreline was a living classroom. I learned about clams and mussels and all these things, but really just giving them ownership as 16-year-olds. With respect to the dollar value question, and I'm just framing this because I think to your point, Dr. Brown, there has to be an intersection, right? Like policy has to be driven by really smart people like you. So don't give up on government yet, please. But like we voted in for policy for our finance department the governor has this like green online sourcing for pens and papers and things like that. And the cost differential's a little bit more, but we voted in a policy to make that be the first stop shop, even if it costs a little more. And one of the questions at the table was, don't look at the cost today, but what's the long-term cost when we think about cost? So policy, like it can work. You really smart people can really influence and be a part. So please be at the table as you continue your life. And then the last point was to the private sector. We've made it requirements, but then also leveraging, we are a capitalist society, incentivizing, right? So there's some minimum baseline requirements around sustainability and resources, but if you do more, you get more. Maybe you get more height, maybe you pay a little less in a fee. So we've really tried to weave it in a way that is policy driven, but also hits the bottom line. So government can work, guys, that's all.
So I'll just, do we have time?
We're actually over time, so I think it's okay.
I'll be quick.
Have go really quickly and then.
For the question about youth, we're a couple national tools, and so we don't get to work with young people or students as directly, but we have made all our data available for download, and we see at the beginning of each semester a huge uptick in a couple of different public health schools for intro to EPI or similar courses. We also developed classroom lessons for high school and middle school teachers so they could use our data to help people start thinking about these health challenges. And in them we say, all right, you're the mayor of a city, and what are you going to do about this? And it's a little unfair, but I think it helps people think. For the direct wearable sensors, we looked at some of these data sets, especially around mobility, and found that the data sets that were available to us were not totally always up to our standard, because it's hard to get a lot of people to wear the same sensors or enroll in the same data collection thing. And then finally, for the private sector, I'm going to maybe I'm a little naive, or I'm a little bit too idealistic. I have often resisted the dollars and cents arguments, because we got into this because we think that arguments based on people's health and well-being are prima facie valid, and we don't need to put dollar amounts on it. And I don't really love putting dollar amounts on people's lives or well-being, and nobody listens to that, right? It's like the paper that radicalized me was about obesity. It's like, how much more it costs in jet fuel to move heavy bodies around? It's like, these are human beings. What has happened to our brains? Like, the brain rot is incredible. So I do think that effective public health interventions often run through the private sector and the money people. God, my brain rot's kicking in. But I always sort of hold my nose a little bit when we do it.
Arnab, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, so it's funny you should mention that idea. We had an NSF and an NIH project that, for a variety of reasons, was looking at that, but it's not funded. We think that's a very important question you ask, because, for example, in New York City, there's a threshold that the city council is trying to approach, saying that they need, for renters, landlords need to set to air temperatures at a certain level during the summer. What that level is, we don't know. And it depends on who you are. And so the individualized aspect of this. So, we put Oura rings on people who have indoor sensors, and we start seeing what's happening to the physiology of these folks. We have some preliminary data, but we're starting to do that work. In terms of the youth side, we've engaged the idea of generativity, particularly bridging older adults from senior centers with the interests of looking back at their past life and the legacy that they've lived through their lived experience, and bringing that to bear on youth and what their future could look like. So it's more or less about reimagining tree planting and stewardship programs in that framework, which we think is critically important, because after you plant trees, they tend to die, particularly more often in low-income and structurally disadvantaged neighborhoods. And so big tree planting efforts don't survive unless you think about this maintenance strategy into the longer term. And just to answer that question about the private sector, we've been thinking about this is why I think looking at utilization of healthcare matters. I'm sadly an economist, so I hope you're not allergic to what I'm going to say, Ben. But once death is quantifiable, sadly, but it's kind of in economic terms, it's an unrealized loss. Whereas, and that's a very sad thing to say, but as an economist, that's what an economist would think. But if you end up in hospital, there's a cost there, right? And so understanding what that is means that you have to understand like what an ER visit costs, what an admission costs. And when you start aggregating that becomes an important number. And actually, under the previous administration, I worked with OCHI, which is the Office of Climate Change and Health Equity. This was of interest to members of Congress to say, how much is it costing our healthcare system, these heat waves, these hurricanes and alike? And once you can put a dollar value on that, you can create mitigations and adaptation strategies and say, let's reinvest that money and potentially prevent that. I think that's the argument that we should be having.
Well, once again, I would love to thank the panel and thank you all for joining and staying so long and over, and to the mayors. And I just, again, I love this final parting words from the mayor of don't give up hope on your government, invest in community, in building data and understanding that's meaningful, that makes a difference in people's lives. And I think that is something that brings people together. It brings community, it rebuilds community, and that's addressing a lot of the problems that I think we're facing as a country now. So onward and upward, and have a great climate week, and thank you all for joining us.